Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, today we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the various conflicts taking place around the world, including the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine, and the recent Iranian attacks against the state of Israel. Now, first, we are still trying to assess the effectiveness of these Iranian ballistic missile strikes that occurred within the last 24 hours. Now, what is the difference between this strike and the last strike? Well, the last strike was initiated with slow-moving cruise missiles and drones that took several hours to get to Israel, followed on by ballistic missile strikes. Essentially ineffective. The strike that we observed yesterday was almost exclusively, or was exclusively, ballistic missiles. Ballistic missiles. Now, the Iranians went after several different targets. They went after the Mossad headquarters. They went after a number of Israeli air bases. They went after gas platforms. Now, we have not seen satellite footage of what these attacks look like in terms of outcome. Now, what I want to do is take you, the viewer, to some of these Israeli air bases. Now, this air base, just to the east of Beersheba, and I want you to look at these hardened shelters. Now, these are very hardened, super hardened earthen shelters. You can see, if you kind of can understand what you're looking at, the aircraft you can see enter here. So this is the shelter, maintenance bays, what have you. Shelter, house the aircraft, shelters the aircraft, shelters the aircraft. So you can see these are designed to hold 6 aircraft. They could be F-16Is, they could be F-15Is, they could be F-35s. Difficult to say what the Israelis have placed into these shelters. And there's also some thought that the Israelis sent many of the aircraft airborne when these attacks took place. Now, these are incredibly hardened shelters. Would they survive a direct ballistic missile impact? A direct ballistic missile impact? Probably not. Probably not. Now, with that being said, these ballistic missiles would have to impact a very specific aim point to destroy one of these hardened shelters. If the missile hits here or here or over here or here, it's not going to affect the shelter. It has to be a direct impact right here. Now, are Iranian ballistic missiles accurate enough to hit that type of aim point? Probably not. Probably not. We believe that their CEP, the circular error of probability, is probably between 30 and 100 meters. Now, they could have definitely gotten impact points inside the airbase. Undoubtedly, they could have damaged the runway. But the likelihood that the Iranians would have the ability to target and destroy one of these shelters, unless completely by luck, is fairly remote. Normally, you're going to need a laser-guided 2,000-pound bomb or a much more advanced munition like a JDAM to hit said target. Now, yes, a 2,000-pound JDAM would have the accuracy and the guidance to hit these types of targets. If it was another nation state that had its own global positioning, such as GLONASS or the U.S. GPS system, yes, they could have possibly hit these targets. Now, you also have to take in consideration the idea that that GPS or GLONASS jamming would also be in effect as well, which would further degrade the accuracy of these incoming ballistic missiles. So the likelihood of these super hardened shelters getting hit, and you get different shelters. You have these shelters, and if you look over here, you have additional shelters. And these two are hardened. These are made out of concrete. These are concrete structures. And another probable aim point for the Iranians. You can see the blast walls here. But difficult target to go after. And Israel has a number of these fortified air bases. This is one. If we go down further to the south, if I can find it in a reasonable amount of time, I think it's over here. Yeah. So this air base in question, you can, again, each one of these is 6 hardened shelters, so you can get an idea of just how the Israelis harden these air bases. So if you give 6, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're looking at essentially 60 aircraft can be placed in this one air base into these very hardened shelters. But we'll eventually get satellite evidence of what the strike looked like, if they were, how effective they were. I'm guessing they may have been able to hit the runway. Hard to say. The Iranians have been able to do that with targets in Iraq, but Israel is much further than Iraq, so you will lose accuracy. And then at the same time, the Iranians were using inertia guidance in the cases with targets in Iraq, so the accuracy would degrade as you get farther and farther away from the launching site for a number of different reasons. But then you also have the Israelis trying to shoot down many of these ballistic missiles as well. So a lot of the missiles were engaged by Israeli air defense systems. Now, does that mean that the warhead was destroyed? No, probably not. In some cases, if you can understand the ballistic trajectory of the missile, and if you know it's going to land in an open area, well, you just don't even engage it, because then you risk of trying to engage it, and then you knock that warhead off its course, and maybe it hits a civilian area or something along those lines. Now, what's going to happen next? What's going to be the Israeli response? I believe that the Israeli response is going to be significant. I don't believe the Israelis are going to let this one go. It's going to cost the Iranians significantly. Now, what's that strike going to look like? Difficult to say, but there are a lot of very opportunistic targets in Iran that the Israelis could go after. The Israeli attack package is going to look a little bit different than how the Iranians attacked Israel. The Israelis are not going to use ballistic missiles to strike Iran. Most likely it's going to be a complicated attack involving a number of aircraft. The Israelis are going to have to refuel, probably over Saudi Arabia or Iraq, and then they will conduct their operations. You will see a number of different types of Israeli munitions being used. Probably the aircraft that will actually enter Iranian airspace will be the Israeli F-35, with Israeli F-16Is providing support. You could also see Israeli F-15Is as well, launching extended range guided munitions against targets inside of Iran. And again, you have very, very lucrative targets in Iran for the Israelis to go after. Many. But again, the targets, the strikes, what's that going to look like? We don't know. Are the Israelis going to target Tehran? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. It would not be surprising if we were to see the Iranians or the Israelis attack Tehran. Very likely. Now, what are they going to go after in Tehran? Again, difficult to say. But I do believe that we will see the Israelis. This will not be a pinprick. This will not be a demonstration of capability. I really believe that the Israelis are going to hurt Iran in a major way with this upcoming strike. The Israelis again are going to have to establish deterrence. I mean, if you think about what is happening, the Israelis are attacking Iranian proxy forces, be it Hamas, Hezbollah. You are not, and then in response, the Iranians are launching hundreds of ballistic missiles from Iranian territory into Israeli territory. The Israelis have not rained down missiles on Iran. So this is something different. I think the first strike that occurred several months ago, the Israelis let that one go. But I don't think the Israelis are going to let this one go. I don't. I think the Israelis are going to have to reestablish deterrence. And I think the Israelis believe that the Iranians have to come to the conclusion that if they launch missiles at Israel, there's going to be a price. There's going to be a hefty price. And I think we're going to see that in the coming days and weeks whenever this Israeli attack happens. Now, the war continues. The Israelis have entered southern Lebanon. We have reports now that up to 3 Israeli Merkava tanks were hit by Hezbollah anti-tank guided weapon teams. Up to 8 Israeli soldiers have been killed in ongoing operations, and we'll continue to monitor this as the wars continue. Now, if we go further to the north with the ongoing war between the Russian Federation and the Ukraine, there is talk now that the Russians could be preparing for a Zaporizhia offensive. Now, look, the defensive rock of Kolgift, Ogladar, however you want to call it, has been breached and taken over by Russian forces. This was one of the most fortified areas that the Ukrainians controlled. If you look, again, I've talked about this before, a town almost entirely made up of multi-story Soviet-era apartment blocks with bunkers underneath each one of these buildings that have been interconnected by the Ukrainians. Not only that, very little foliage, open fields extending for many, many kilometers in which Ukrainian Javelin teams and other anti-tank guided weapons teams were able to pick off approaching Russian armored infantry fighting vehicles and tanks. But the Russians have established in development. They surrounded the city, and then they initiated a bombing campaign with glided bombs, reducing the city, reducing the force construct of the Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade that was essentially surrounded and stuck in the city. And then they proceeded to destroy that enemy element, that Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade. Now the question, what is going to happen next? Well, it's very likely that we will see eventually the collapse of the entire Ukrainian front in this sector of the conflict. If we go back over to the deep state map, this will give you a pretty good idea of what has been happening over the last several days. And I want to go back where you, the viewer, can see what's been happening. All right, there we go. Now let's fast forward. Here we go. So I've seen some comments in the comment section that would indicate that some believe that the front lines have been static, that very little headway has been made. Now this is a very slow-moving war of attrition that right now is degrading and destroying the Ukrainian military. Now here we go. And here we are. So again, Volodar seized, controlled by the Russians. It would not be surprising to see the Russians make very fast headway in this area. Huge amounts of territory will probably be seized now by Russian forces. The Volodar coal gift was a vital part of the Ukrainian defensive structure in this area. And you're seeing pressures being exerted within the vicinity of Volodar and obviously the fall of Volodar, but you're also seeing pressures being exerted in other locales as well. You are seeing envelopment operations taking place all along the line of contact. And this is the Russian doctrine, this is the Russian strategy right now, is to surround, envelop, and destroy Ukrainian combat units as the war continues. And obviously the next goal is going to be to seek the capitulation of Pokrovsk. That's going to happen. Right now the Ukrainians just don't have a strategy that is going to negate this current Russian strategy of the use of these glide bomb attacks, these very accurate glide bomb attacks. Fix and then glide bomb the living hell out of Ukrainian forces. Surround them to the left, surround them to the right, glide bomb, destroy, and then move in. And that's what we're seeing. So we'll continue to cover. As always, thank you for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. Have a good day.